we've shown you how to part a chicken, and that's really something that you can apply to any type of poultry, turkey or duck as well. It's really the same process. They have very similar anatomy, but there are some differences just in terms of the way the meat is distributed, and so some of the ways that you make the cuts, the final product comes out looking a little bit different. But we've also shown you now how to roast a whole chicken, one technique for it, and obviously there's many different directions you can go if you're cooking a whole chicken. But now I'm going to show you a way that you can cook the whole chicken that is just a little bit of time saving and offers a little more variability in what you can do. And that's called spatchcocking. And spatchcocking is something that I really like, especially in the summer months. We talked about enjoying poultry and enjoying your chicken through all the seasons. And what I mean by that is all the seasons of the year. And so there's different tastes that you have, at least we've experienced that, especially since we moved from the city onto the farm. We've noticed that through each season of the year, we sometimes just have different appetites. And in the summer months, we are looking for something that's a little bit lighter and perhaps sweeter, more fruity flavors to it. And then in the winter months, we're looking for just really savory dishes. And so if you're having chicken all through the different seasons of the year, you want to be able to do different things with it. And spatchcocking is something that I've really liked for the summer months, in part because it shortens our cooking time quite a bit, and it just reduces the amount of time that we have to have the oven running if we're going to be cooking it in the oven. And so in the summer months, anything we can do to reduce the time that the oven's running when it's just hot and it's getting hot inside the house as well is something that we really appreciate. And so this is a way to be able to do that. And it's also just a way to cook the bird in a way that it has kind of an aesthetic appeal to it, and it looks really nice when you put it out on a platter. And so the trick with spatchcocking is really all you're doing is cutting the backbone out of the chicken so that it can lay flat, and there's not a whole lot of science to it. And so I'll show you though with this one the technique. I guess the key thing to consider is just the knives. I made reference to using a sharp knife in the parting video, and that's really important, but what I didn't get into is the type of knife that you use or different options that are available as well. So the type of knife that you use, it doesn't really matter. You can use anything from a chef's knife or a carving knife like I used earlier, up to something like a cleaver can work for this process or for parting as well. And then you can also do just about all of this with poultry shears or a really good set of kitchen shears. So this is a set of stainless steel poultry shears specifically designed for poultry, but also a heavy duty set of kitchen shears that's multi-purpose can work on poultry as well. We have a friend who works professionally as a chef, and he's helped us with some of our farm to table dinners. And it's interesting because when he parts a chicken or almost anything he does with a chicken in the preparation phase, he uses shears. He just reaches for his shears and he cuts through the joints and cuts through the bone and everything using a really good pair of shears. That's what he learned. That's what he's more comfortable with. I tend to go to a knife, but one of the things that I do keep in mind is when I'm doing a process like spatchcocking, when I'm parting, as I described, where you're cutting through joints, and so you're usually cutting through a tendon, but you're not really cutting through the bone, except for that one step where you're cutting the leg bone off, perhaps, or the knuckle of the leg. But when you're spatchcocking, you're cutting through quite a bit of bone, and so it's just worthwhile keeping in mind what type of knife you want to use for that. It needs to be fairly heavy duty. It needs to be a sharp knife, but perhaps it's a process that you don't want to use your high dollar culinary knife for. And so I like to just have a knife that's kind of dedicated to the purpose. We have knives that are a little bit softer steel. A lot of times Japanese knives are a little bit softer steel than some of the German knives, for instance. And so we have some German made knives that are a really hard steel, and they tend to hold up to this process really well. We do have some softer steel knives, and for those I'll often reserve those for other purposes. I'll use them when I'm carving the meat after the chicken is cooked, but for cutting through bone I try to use a hard steel knife, and one that can kind of be dedicated just in case I cause any damage to it. I don't feel as bad as if it was one that I put a lot of money into. So with spatchcocking, like I said, all we're really doing is cutting the backbone out of the chicken, and that allows us to butterfly or lay the chicken flat. And so the easiest way to do it, I stand it up basically with its tail up, and then that gives me something that I can hold on to. That's one of the reasons that I often leave the tails on when I harvest the chickens. And then I take again, a sharp knife, and go to one side of the tail basically, and then try to cut straight down and try to stay as close as I can right along the spine, because there's meat, those jewels, some of the best meat on the chicken right in the back. If we get too far off the spine, we risk cutting through that. And so staying right up along the spine, and as much as I can in one or two smooth motions, cutting straight down the back of the chicken until I get through to basically where the neck would be. And so that's one side, and then just changing my hand position, or I'll show you with shears how it can go as well. You can simply take your shears and cut down the spine in the same way. And again, I don't tend to like this method as much. I just find that a knife works better than shears usually, but you can cut through the bone pretty effectively with shears. And you cut down, I'm actually just gonna switch back to the knife that I'm more comfortable with, and cut all the way down the back until that whole entire backbone comes loose. And then sometimes there's some skin up around where the neck would be that you just need to cut through. And now I've got the spine of the chicken basically that's taken out. And an important note, sometimes you cut this out and you think, well, that's just trash. Don't toss this. This is great for adding to your stock, and it's going to add nutrients into your stock, and it's a way that we can minimize waste when we're processing and using our chickens. So we always set this aside. Oftentimes we'll just put it in a plastic bag, throw it in the freezer, and then the next time that we're making stock, we can pull it out and add it in for the stock making process. So now that the backbone out, we're able to take the chicken and basically, being careful because you've got cut bones now, we want to be careful that we don't cut our hands on it, so careful where you grab, but take the chicken and just kind of fold it open, and that creates a chicken that lays flat. And what is going to happen with this is we don't have that air cavity now, where the cavity of the bird when we were roasting it, so it results in heat basically being able to get around all of the meat a little more effectively, and that's going to result in less cooking time. Emily referenced that it takes roughly an hour to cook a whole to roast a whole chicken. A spatchcock chicken like this, sometimes we can take 15 minutes or so off of that cooking time. When we are cooking, it's not a bad idea to go ahead and rotate it during the cooking process, just to make sure that you're getting it evenly cooked if you have any uneven heat within your oven. But another way that you can speed up the cooking process is to basically brown the meat before you roast it. So it's kind of a real simple form of braising, it entails this, but you can also just do it in order to get nice crisp brown skin quickly, and then be able to cook it more quickly in the oven. So I'll show you real quick, we'll pause for a second, I'll get a pan over and show you real quick a way that you can do that. This is something that we can do with the whole chicken, as we have here, spatchcocked, or with the parts of the chicken if you've parted it out. All right, so what I have done here is I've just got our cast iron pan heating up with some cooking fat in it. And in this case, I use tallow, but whether you're using butter or oil or whatever type of cooking fat you prefer. And then I'm taking the whole entire chicken and searing it in that cooking fat. And the nice thing about spatchcocking is like you get pretty good contact with all the skin surface basically in the pan. And so one of the tricks with searing is that what we're trying to do is brown the meat at a high temperature. I'm not trying to cook it all the way through. I'm just really browning the skin, and then I'm going to take it and put it into the oven to finish the cooking process. So with searing, I never add seasoning before I sear. I found that, I've seen plenty of people who recommend adding seasoning in, however you're going to season this, if it's with some thyme, or even if you're doing like a barbecue or something of that nature. I found that when you sear with seasoning, it seems like the seasoning almost always burns, and it's just not something that I prefer. So I simply have the salted chicken that I'm going to sear until the skin is nicely browned, and then I'll add my seasoning and put it in the oven to roast. And it just, for me, that seems to prevent burning and prevent that foul taste that comes along with burnt seasoning. So what I'm trying to do here is get good meat contact, and if you have the chicken parted into 8 pieces, it's the same process. You just have 8 pieces in here, and then you can kind of rotate and move as it browns. One of the ways to really know when it's browned well is making sure that the chicken's not sticking. Once it's started to release, you know that it's browning reasonably well. But I can take and I can kind of rotate the bird and try to get different spot contact. With the spatchcocks, I can hold some portions down to ensure that I have the legs and thighs getting browned as well. Or if the breasts are not making good contact, I can press forward a little bit and make sure that I'm getting good contact with all of the skin that I want browned. So we'll allow this to brown for just a few more minutes here, and then we'll turn it over and put it into the oven to finish the cooking process.